Hello there, Star Wars fans. Thank you for tuning into your favorite intergalactic frequency. So about 2 weeks ago, the Mandalorian Grogu teaser trailer dropped, and it was okay, I guess. Let's just say it was not met with much love from the fan base. Some hate, some skepticism, many critiques, but at most, apathy. At least from what I've been able to gather. Now, I am also very skeptical of how this film will be. Like many others, I was not impressed with this teaser, let alone the idea to put Mando and Grogu on the silver screen. I know it's just a teaser trailer, but this doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, or at least what it should feel like. It feels safe, corporate, and like a show promotion, but of course, it's a show coming to the big screen 4 years too late. But before I get into the conversation around this movie, quickly let's go over the actual trailer. Not much to break down, however, but there is some we can discuss. So right away, we have the Razor Crest back. Where we last left Mando, he was still using the N1 Starfighter. I love that ship. It's a great callback to episode 1, and it just looks so cool. But it looks like he will build a new Razor Crest, and I'm guessing from the yellow panels that he will probably use the N1 to help build his new ship. Next are some shots of Grogu, and you already know this movie is really going to be targeting the normies and those who were on the Baby Yoda hype train a few years ago. They will be trying to play up his cuteness to bring in that audience that isn't really into Star Wars. And, oh hey, and Anzellan. I will say, while I'm over the puppet look, he is moving much better than he did in Season 3. It looks more natural. Now we see Sigourney Weaver's character for the first time. Apparently, she will be some leader from the New Republic and will be hiring Mando for a job in this movie. Not much else to say on this just yet. Nerdrotic calls her the Kathleen Kennedy stand-in for this movie, saying this is a self-insertion. That made me chuckle, but I guess we'll see how she plays out. She's done some great work in the past, and maybe she can play a good role in this story. And back to the same Grogu using the Force to try and sneak food bit. I really hope they age him up at some point in the future. I know his species ages much slower, but I wonder what his mental capacity is. He responds to his name, he understands Din overall from what we've seen, and he even understood the options Luke laid out for him in the Book of Boba Fett. But he still seems too babyish. But then again, in this trailer, he's pushing more buttons and seems to be assisting more than a toddler would. He was 50 years old when we met him in Season 1. Roughly, they said it's similar to a 5-year-old for humans. Season 1 was around 5 years after Return of the Jedi, and I think this movie is starting to push closer to almost 10 years post-Return of the Jedi. So how old will he act actually? This ties back into why I don't love the puppet anymore. It feels limited, and it somewhat forces the character to stay stagnant. I personally am a big fan of the CGI Yoda from the prequels. Don't get me wrong, I love Puppet Yoda in Empire and Return of the Jedi. I know it's low-key one of the highlights of TLJ, but let's not acknowledge that film, please. For what the character needed to do, it fits so well. And with CGI prequel Yoda, after they changed it from the puppet in episode 1 in 1999, I could see how he evolved into OT Yoda. And with the physical moves he needed to do, when he fought Dooku in Attack of the Clones, when he fought Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, it worked. I mean, I gotta give it to ILM, and I gotta give it to George. They did a great job, and it didn't take me out of the film. I get it. Lucasfilm wants to pay tribute to the original trilogy feeling, especially since this time period is after the OT. But I think it's really because they want to avoid the prequel feel and the connections. I wish Lucasfilm did more to connect with the prequel trilogy, but it feels like they still think it is hated by a majority of the fan base. They're out of touch with the fandom, and really they're out of touch with what people are really wanting from them with this IP. I mean, just remember the hype around Kenobi before it came out, and then the viewership it had? While the show sucked, people still were really interested in Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi. They wanted that prequel feel. A highlight of that show are the flashbacks with Hayden Christensen's Anakin before episode 2. They could have done better with the de-aging technology. My mans look old, but still, people were loving the prequel flashbacks. And Hayden Christensen coming back for Anakin and Ahsoka was also one of the highlights of that first season, and I've heard for season 2, we're going to get a lot more of that. So even more prequel connections, also potentially Mortis. I am excited to see Zeb in this movie. We just saw him briefly in Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and he didn't pop up in Ahsoka Season 1. So I'm curious to see what he's been up to. And then we get Rada the Hutt, Jabba's son, voiced by Jeremy Allen White. The plot of this movie will apparently revolve around him as he will need protection. Last time we saw Rada in a similar format, he was just a baby in the Clone Wars animated movie from 2008. And that movie was not very well received by the fandom at the time as well. So what a coincidence that Lucasfilm will be putting him in another TV show movie. He can't seem to escape from that. I wonder if that was intentional or just a lack of knowing their own history. Next, we get these droids. I don't know about you, but they don't feel Star Wars to me. There's a certain vibe and aesthetic that Star Wars has, and it's not too sci-fi like. On my podcast, Sessions on Dagobah, me and my co-host Star Wars Nerd were discussing how this feels like a Transformers look, and also like the fighting robots from Real Steel with Hugh Jackman. And this is something that I think plays a role in why so many of us fans don't love this trailer. Some pieces of it feel off. Whether it is not feeling like a Star Wars movie, or even not like Star Wars at all. I don't know. But these droids feel like a design choice by just any run-of-the-mill sci-fi company. I will say, however, the aliens look good. I'm happy to see a mix of aliens in this trailer. One criticism many of us have had is not enough aliens in Star Wars projects, and or being a big one. But with some other recent projects like Skeleton Crew, we had a lot of aliens that felt so real and natural to Star Wars. And lastly, we get the AT-AT shot. This was originally shown at Star Wars Celebration in Japan, an extended cut of the scene showing more of the action inside the AT-AT. The action looks cool, I will say. It's an aspect of The Mandalorian that I've always enjoyed. But even with this AT-AT falling off the cliff for 30 seconds, this just still doesn't feel grand. Speaking of not feeling grand, the new title format is not one of my favorites. A rip-off Indiana Jones style with a worse color scheme and a way worse title. Not to go off on a tangent, but I hate these creatively bankrupt titles these IPs put out over the last couple of years. Just a character's name, no creativity, no heart, no soul. Ahsoka, Kenobi, pretty much all the Marvel shows. And yeah, I even consider The Rise of Skywalker to be a shitty title. I will give Book of Boba Fett some credit though, for trying to at least be creative, even though the show is shit. Skeleton Crew is probably my favorite title of the last few years. It begs the questions of what is it about, leaving it open-ended about its subject matter, and comes across as fun and creative. Okay, enough of that. But yeah, this movie title and title style is another thing that gives the impression of corporate slop, and begs the question, how important is this to Disney and Lucasfilm? And lastly, Forged for IMAX. I am assuming this movie will be a more premiere experience than the prior seasons on Disney+, at least in terms of its cinematography. $166 million, not much more than a normal season, but I hope it went into making it look fantastic. But then again, I don't know, and most fans aren't sure either. We've already seen them throw way too much money at shows that still look like crap. So after 2 weeks, there's been a lot online from the Star Wars community. But not all press is good press. It wouldn't be right to say the attention means something positive in this case. Most of the reactions to this are similar to mine, or even worse. Firstly, many of us agree this is 4 years too late. Star Wars as a brand is not doing well over the last few years, especially since The Acolyte, and Season 3 of Mando fell flat on its face. The hype for Baby Yoda hasn't been around for some time. Post-Season 2 would have been a better time for this movie, at the peak of the fandom and at the peak of the love from normies. Another big reaction I'm seeing about this is that it still feels just like a show and not an actual Star Wars movie. The movie gives off the same vibe as this meeting could have been an email. Maybe it's the marketing, or maybe it's because we were all so used to seeing Din and Grogu on the small screen. But for this to be the first return to theaters for Star Wars since The Rise of Skywalker, it still feels like a miss. A desperation move by the suits to simply get a movie out. I don't think this is how I would have wanted to start my movie resurgence. Based on what's been confirmed to be filming, I would have started with something like Starfighter, something potentially more grand and new, giving fans a reason to head to the theater. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a consistently failing president. I'm sure it's a great idea. But of course, there is hate for this trailer out there. A decent amount too. Not just critical skepticism, but actual hate for everything I've already said, but just more. People hoping this fails and not finding a single detail to compliment. Now, I don't blame them. A lot of those hating on it have been unhappy with Star Wars since the sequel trilogy. One Star Wars fans just angry at the direction this beloved franchise has taken since The Force Awakens. At least they are consistent. But the biggest thing I've realized when it comes to this trailer is the apathy. Overwhelming apathy. There is very little overall conversation about this outside of the Star Wars creators world. And guys, apathy is the worst reaction of them all. At least when there is hate, you could say people are paying attention and they care about something. But apathy means disillusionment, not caring, and that's a deadly blow for an IP. Again, this movie is 4 years too late. A lot has happened since Season 2, including the show having an awful Season 3. Star Wars being out of the theater since 2019 hasn't helped keep people engaged. But the real killer is the awful quality of a majority of the projects that have been released over the last 5 years. The fanbase is divided, jaded, and some are at a point where they're losing hope. I sometimes find myself feeling the same, if I can be transparent. Hence, as a joke, I've been calling this movie the Mandalorian and Grogu. It's going to be a nothing burger. And that's the talk of the scoopers mostly. One of my favorite YouTubers, Josh from the Den of Nerds, has occasionally talked about this. Some of his best sources have summed up this movie as nothing special and to not get your hopes up. It's not going to be anything that is worth more than being on a TV show. And this came out well before the teaser trailer did. And post-trailer, it feels more true. It's no secret that Lucasfilm has been struggling to get a project going for the big screen. Since The Last Jedi, there have been many movie announcements and creatives tied to Star Wars. And an overwhelming majority of them have not come to fruition, and most likely never ever will. I am honestly so tired of talking about this, but it needs to be said. It plays a huge part in why this movie is what it is. So over the last few years, I have not been surprised when I've heard that behind the scenes, Disney has been pressing Lucasfilm to get a movie out, pressing Kathleen Kennedy to get something on the big screen. I recall some years ago reading that Disney were pretty much demanding a movie out by 2025. And I think this movie was announced around the same time of that news. But then the writer's strike happened and this movie got delayed to 2026. But I also remember this was announced after the Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy Rey movie, James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi movie, and the untitled Filoni film all announced at Star Wars Celebration 2022. So this movie was pushed into production very quickly. So it makes me wonder, is this just a potential season 4 rewritten for a movie? I believe this movie is actually a movie simply to save Bob Iger from shitting a chicken. And there's even more to support this. Now, a budget of $166 million is no joke, unless we're talking about other Star Wars budgets. Other shows, and especially the movies under Disney, have cost so much more. Some of those projects make me wonder where the hell they were spending all that money. And for some of it, I get it. And trust me, part of me is happy to see a movie get a $166 million budget and still look good. However, a good script will shine despite the budget it has, but a bad one will always be shit no matter how much money you throw at it. So with a budget this small in comparison to other projects, and with either Disney or Lucasfilm not caring as much about this film, I am thinking this will be deemed a success by Disney no matter what. The reason why I think this is a bad thing is because it further allows for Lucasfilm to be ignoring so many elephants in the room. Yeah, there are a lot of them. Hollywood accounting can make any movie look like a success. And if they make it look like a success, they truly won't be listening to us fans. It's not going to take $1 billion to have this film be profitable. The bar is much lower. So even if this film doesn't make above $500 million at the box office, it seems like they will not really care. It will be viewed positively, and Kathleen Kennedy will make herself seem like a competent president, even while further adding salt to the wound that is Star Wars' future. I theorize that this film will most likely not break $500 million, and if it does, definitely not more than $600 million. However, I could always be wrong. This movie will be a true test to how much Star Wars is resonating with normies and casual audiences. Can Star Wars still drive the viewers to the theaters just off name recognition alone? Does Star Wars still have the hype and the juice around Baby Yoda? Will that still carry the box office dollars in a big way? A lot of factors to look at here, including the fact that the movie industry sales are down since 2020. Streaming services, writer strike, lack of quality content, politics, etc., you name it, have all played a role in the industry trends. So this movie is coming in at a weird time. Marvel has vastly underperformed, or maybe they established a new normal, while DC Superman just cracked over $600 million. But still, where will that leave The Mandalorian and Grogu? Well, that's all for today from your favorite galaxy far, far away. I can't seem to get excited for this movie, and I hope you can see why. But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you agree with me on some points, or am I out of pocket? Let me know in the comments down below. And please, don't forget to like the video and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss what's going on in the Star Wars galaxy. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you. Always.
Another happy landing.